All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I have the honor of speaking with a man who is important to Black history and to the game of baseball. I'm speaking with the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri, Mr. Bob Kendrick. How are you today, sir?
I am doing great. It is great to see you, and thanks for, reaching out to me.
Yes, sir. So, first off, I'm going to ask you, when and why did you decide to dedicate your life to the museum and the game of baseball entirely?
1993 is when I began my affiliation with the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. Believe it or not, it started as a volunteer. Yeah, I started volunteering for the organization in 1993. At that time, I was working for the Kansas City Star, the daily newspaper, and I was working in the Star's promotions department, which functioned as its in house advertising agency. And I drew the assignment of promoting the museum's first ever traveling exhibition, an exhibition called Discover Greatness. And believe it or not, that exhibit is still touring the country to this very day. It
Wow.
is actually on location at the Yogi Berra Museum in Montclair, New Jersey, and it was playing to rave reviews before the pandemic shut down the Berra Museum. But they were very smart. They created a virtual experience from the exhibition. So it blows my mind that that exhibit is still just as popular today as it was in 1993 when we debuted it here at historic 18th and Vine, where the museum now currently operates. And that began my involvement. I was a baseball fan, and here I quickly discovered that there was this chapter of baseball and American history that I really didn't know. And so here I am now, 28 years later, and I'm now the museum's president. So I went from being a volunteer to now trying to run this great organization. I can be honest, I never saw that coming. There's no way to see that coming. Really, I just wanted to get involved. I fell in love with this story and I fell in love with the athletes who made this story. And so I just wanted to get involved, support this organization in any way that I can, as fate would have it. It has turned into a tremendous career for me where I've gotten to meet some of the most amazing people that I never could have possibly dreamt that I would have met. Particularly a kid from Crawfordville, Georgia.
Mhm.
Crawfordville, Georgia, man, is all of 500 people, man. You know what I'm saying? It's a very small rural town, and here's this old country boy that has now had the opportunity to walk through this museum with American presidents and first ladies of these United States, all kinds of other dignitaries, and of course, just a host of tremendously well-known, famous athletes, and you name it, actors and entertainers, and so it has been a blessing for me to have a chance to do this work, and it's work that is good.
Mhm.
What we do is something that we hope will stand the test of time, so that others will be able to enjoy this place years after I'm gone. And I just feel like anytime you have a chance to do something that is essentially bigger than you are, I don't know if there's anything more gratifying. And I think our entire team feels much the same. This is absolutely, has been and still remains a labor of love.
Well, I'm sure that everyone that has been to the museum or has heard of you or the museum knows that you're doing a great job keeping the museum the way it is, even throughout this pandemic and before. So, and the legacy of the museum will continue to live on through you as well.
Well, and I
So,
think that's what we wanted. Having known so many of the Negro League players, they were so proud. They were really proud. They'd be proud of you playing this game, because they knew how good they were, and they knew how good their league was, and
sir,
so they didn't need anybody to validate them. So these were very self-assured athletes, but in the grand scheme of things, they really didn't think they had done anything that special. They were just playing baseball. They were making a living playing the game of baseball, a game that they loved. And it's years later that people are now finally recognizing their contributions not only to our sport, but their contributions to our society. And it's at a time when there are not many of those players still with us. Yeah, they're very few. And it
Yeah.
seems like we're losing them every day at an alarming rate. They are like World War II vets. As matter of fact, many of them were World War II vets. And so we knew from the onset that this was literally a race against time. And what I mean when I say that is that the people who made this history, it wasn't a matter of if, it was simply a matter of when they were all going to be gone. But what we also understood is that this story is too compelling, it's too meaningful, it is too inspirational to allow it to die when that last Negro Leaguer left the face of this earth.
Hmm.
And that's why I tell people all the time, the Negro Leagues Museum doesn't need to survive. It has to survive
Yes,
so
sir.
that we don't lose this piece of baseball and Americana.
Yes, sir. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, what role did the legend Buck ONeil play in the establishment of the museum?
Well, I can say unequivocally, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone who had a hand in helping build this institution, there would not be a Negro Leagues Baseball Museum had it not been for the tireless leadership of John Jordan Buck O'Neill.
Hmm.
Uh, I I tell people all the time that old Yankee Stadium was the house that Ruth built. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum is the house that Buck O'Neill built. And it's important for me that his spirit still plays on here at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. He was so instrumental. He dedicated the last 16 years of his illustrious life to doing everything he possibly could to make sure that this museum could, number one, be established, number two, grow and be healthy and whole. And he was doing this as volunteer chairman of this museum. He wasn't getting paid to do it. And this was always at the forefront of his existence. And he was traveling all over the country, preaching the gospel of the Negro Leagues and the virtues of his museum to any and everybody who would listen. And because of that, people did come on board, both financially and through other, aspects of our operations, which has allowed us to grow leaps and bounds from the time that we started this museum in 1990 in a little one-room office. And here we are now in our 31st year of existence, recognized as America's national Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. That would not have happened without Buck O'Neill.
Understand. Well, I'm sure Buck ONeil is looking down on you now, and he's
Oh
very
man,
proud of the work you've done.
I talk to Buck every single day. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't talk to Buck. Now he don't always talk back to me, but I really feel like this will be in April. It will mark my 10th year of being back as president of the museum,
Mm.
and ever since I've come back as president, I just felt like Buck was standing on my shoulder, kind of guiding my footsteps. And there's an old adage that says the good Lord takes care of babies and fools. And I'm not sure which category I fall in, but I feel like I'm getting a little divine intervention on this journey, and Buck has been kind of helping me every step of the way. You know, you can't possibly fill his enormous shoes. They're too big,
Yeah.
and you'd be foolish to think that you could. And there are those who would feel the weight of his shadow on them. But for me, his shadow, I see it as protection. I don't feel the weight. No, it is something that is over me, but it's protecting me. And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of how I've always felt about it. And like I said, I really do believe that I get a little divine intervention, particularly in some of these difficult decisions that you have to make. And, I just go back and I think, well, what would Buck do? And it
Yeah.
helps kind of guide.
Okay. The next question I wanted to ask you is, when you walk the halls of the museum, what kind of feeling does that bring to you?
Man, it's hard to express, but not just even when I walk in physically into the museum. When I walk into the building, there's an overwhelming sense of pride. But when you walk into that museum, if you have any sense of self, man, you feel this. You feel this. And it's not burdening. It's triumphant. It is joyous. And I think that's what we want people to understand. I think some of our visitors come and they think they're going to be introduced to a sad, somber story because we know that this story is anchored against the ugliness of American segregation, a horrible chapter in this country's history, shameful chapter in this country's history. But out of segregation rose this wonderful story of triumph and conquest. And it's based on one small, simple principle. You won't let me play with you? I'll create a league of my own. And so for me, when I walk in, understanding the humble beginnings of this museum, knowing that we started in a one-room office, a fraction of the size of my office. That was the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. I remember when I first walked in and I came down and the late Don Motley was the executive director at that time. And I come in and I walk into this office and I say, well, I'm looking for the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. He says, son, you're standing in the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. And so when you come from such humble roots, and then to see what we've put together in what is still a relative small footprint, 10,000 square feet, which we thought was a lot of space. Now we realize that it's not nearly enough space.
Yeah.
But it is so special. It is so special, and you feel it. And for me, there's an overwhelming sense of pride that comes along with knowing how we started this to where we are. But it fuels me even more to take us where we still need to go so that this place will be here for generations to come to secure the long-term future. But there's an overwhelming sense of pride. Every time I walk in, every time I meet one of our visitors, I get to share a story or two with them and see the delight that they have, you know, that pride is reinforced by so many who take the time to thank us for the work that we're doing, and that resonates, man. It means something. It means that we are doing exactly what we were supposed to be doing.
Right. So throughout the years, there have been studies showing the decrease in African Americans playing baseball, and that is no secret. In 2020, USA Today did a study that saw a 0.1% increase in African American MLB players as of opening day. So I wanted to ask you, how can a museum play a role in order to help get African American youth interested enough to start playing baseball again?
And I think, and sometimes on surface level, people don't necessarily see the connection. But I think we play a tremendous role in this, particularly as we are trying to pull young urban kids into this game. So as they are being introduced to this game, how special is it that they can come through this museum, or we can provide access to this museum so that they see themselves? I just believe that baseball, more so than any other sports, is aspirational. You have to see people that look like you playing this game in order to want to play this game. And so when those kids walk through the Negro Leagues Museum, they see people who look just like them, who played this game as well as anyone ever played this game. But not only did they play the game, they owned teams. They were managers and coaches and traveling secretaries and
Yep.
team physicians.
Yep.
They fulfilled every role that you could fill within the business of this game. And that is important too, because I want young people to play this game and dream of playing it at the next level, whether the next level is in college like you are, or subsequently, if it all works out and their talents can take them to the major leagues. But I
Yes, sir.
also want them to know that there are other opportunities within the business of this game that you should be prepared to compete for as well. And so it's important. And so we feel like taking care of this history is only one aspect of what this museum should be doing. We still
Right.
promote this great game, even though it's through the history of this game. And we want to have a hand, we have a vested interest in wanting to see urban kids play this game and excel at this game, but more importantly, grow and be nurtured in this game. Because as you well know, you learn a lot about yourself playing this game,
Yes, sir.
because this game at its crux is a game of failure. Yeah, you fail more times than you succeed in this
Yes,
game.
sir.
Yeah. And so if you get 3 hits every 10 trips to the plate, man, you're a Hall of Famer. That's how tough this game is.
Yes, sir.
Yet it is a game that everybody feels that they can play because your stature doesn't dictate whether or not you can play this game. Man, you can be 5'3", weigh 150 pounds, or you can be 6'8", 6'9", like Aaron Judge is, and weigh 280 and still play this game. And the late great Buck ONeil would say something. He said, you could have 280-year-old men sitting on a couch watching a game, and somebody drops a pop fly, and what's the first words that come out of their mouth? I could have caught that. Yeah.
That's true.
But if
That's true.
LeBron James misses a dunk, we ain't all saying we could have done that. That's the beauty of baseball. But we know how tough this game really is to play. And so, but no, we feel like we have an inherent responsibility to introduce this game to our children in hopes that they will fall in love with this game as well.
Thank you. Also, so the next question I wanted to ask you is, in 2020, Major League Baseball finally designated the Negro Leagues as Major League. How do you feel about the MLB recognizing the Negro Leagues as a major league? And could this be called a merger similar to the NFL and the AFL and the NBA and the ABA?
You know, it's interesting that you put it in that perspective. I go back to 1920 when Andrew Rube Foster formed the Negro Leagues in a meeting that took place here in Kansas City. Literally a stone's throw from my office is where the meeting took place. And out of that meeting, they signed into existence the Negro National League, the first successful organized Black baseball league. Well, in 1920, Andrew Rube Foster was thinking about how he could create a league that was so dynamic that Major League Baseball would expand. So those same models that you talked about, NFL, AFL, the old NBA, well, the current NBA, the old ABA, that's what he was thinking in 1920. And under Rube Foster's model, you would have had complete integration of baseball because not only would you have had players in the game, you would have had executives and managers and coaches well before this ever transpired. And
Mhm.
honestly, under Rube Foster's model, you would have had a tremendous pool of athletes to choose from because they started with 8 teams. So, for example, let's say Major League Baseball would have expanded and brought 4 of those teams in. Well, now you'd had this pool from those other 4 teams that would have filled those 4 teams that would have merged in. Can you imagine the kind of talent that would have been on those teams?
Yeah,
And
no.
yet you still
Yeah.
would have had an expanding pool for those teams to draw from. And I don't think that the major leagues were nearly ready for that because they were already fearful of losing to black teams. And I
Yes.
can tell you now, they would have put some powerhouse teams together. And then you would have also had the economic resources that would allow you to kind of operate in a similar vein in which they did in the major leagues. But that was Rube Foster's forward thinking in 1920. He was so far ahead of his time. And so when we get to this past December, when Major League Baseball does make that historic announcement that it was at long last recognizing the Negro Leagues for exactly what they were, a major league.
Yes, sir.
You know, this league wouldn't take a backseat to any league. And so yeah, I was excited. about it because of its historical significance. As I said earlier, the Negro League players were never looking for anyone to validate them. They knew how good they were. And as I mentioned, they knew how good the league was. And quite frankly, the major leaguers knew how good they were.
Yes, sir.
But in terms of reckoning, atonement, acknowledgement for those courageous owners who financed these teams and those courageous players who endured tremendous social adversity to play the game that they love, yeah, this is significant. And it still remains to be seen on how the stats are going to be integrated into major league annals. But what it does do is it helps fans understand how good these players were. And, again, because they're going to be focused strictly on league games, well, Josh Gibson's home run totals may not be as lofty as we know them to be,
Right.
because they didn't play as many games as they played in the major leagues. And so for me, I would have kept his home run totals for any and everybody that he played against, including the major leaguers. Because I can tell you now, Josh Gibson lit everybody up.
Yes, sir.
And no, he hit over 420 in exhibition games against major leaguers. So he lit everybody up. And so, yeah, his home run totals may not be as lofty, but by the same token, his 1943 season where he hit 441 is now likely going to be the single season batting record.
That's
So it's a
amazing.
little bit of give and take. But for me, the stats are more contextual. They help put things in context. You can never reduce the Negro Leagues to just stats. That doesn't even remotely tell the story. And it won't tell the story of how J.L. Wilkinson, who owned the Kansas City Monarchs, bought an airplane in 1943 so that he could fly Satchel and hire Satchel Paige out to other teams so that Satchel could pitch for them, make some more money, and then come back and join the Monarchs. The stats are never going to tell you that. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? So they provide context. They provided enough quantifiable data to allow for this historic date to occur. And so that is meaningful, but you got to look much deeper than just the numbers.
all right. Well, actually, my next question was about the stats, and I know you had to say you got to look much deeper than numbers, but this is just a question I had to ask. So when you spoke to us at the Hank Aaron Invitational in Florida, you
Yeah.
were telling us a story about Satchel Paige, and you told us that Satchel Paige, the fastest he ever threw was 105. And I remember the whole room just went quiet because nobody could believe it. So, and so now with the integration of stats, would Satchel Paige's 105-mile-per-hour pitch, would that make that the fastest pitch in MLB history?
It got to be right up there. Now, I think Aroldis Chapman has gotten into that 103, 104 range. But, it'll be interesting to see if those little facts around the Negro Leagues will be integrated in as well. So, a good case, most recognize Ted Williams as the last, professional ball player to hit 400.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Artie Wilson in the Negro Leagues hit 402 in 1948. That would technically make him the last. And would now the Monarchs get credit for night baseball, which started 5 years before they started it in Cincinnati, which had been given credit for. And so would Satchel's fastball at 105 actually be the fastest pitch in baseball history? There's a part of me that would love to see it registered that way. I doubt that it will happen. And as I told you all when we were in Florida, the 105 is impressive, very much so. But 105 with pinpoint control
Yeah.
is almost unhittable. And so yesterday I was doing something on social media. On Saturday, a guy brought me a copy of the 1948 Indianapolis Star. And in that paper, it had a picture of Larry Doby and Satchel Paige right after Satchel had just, I guess, a couple of days after Satchel had thrown a 1-0 shutout of the Chicago White Sox in front of 78,000 people.
Wow. Wow.
Man, they packed the ballpark to see the old man pitch. His first three starts drew over 200,000 fans.
That's crazy.
he's now, again, he's supposed to be 42 years old. And so he wins his first start against the Washington Senators 5-3. Old man was a little shaky. You know, he actually walked a few people, then he settled in. But after that, he shut out the White Sox in Comiskey 5-0. And they got over 50,000 in the ballpark. They had to turn away another 12,000 who couldn't get into the ballpark. And then they go back to Cleveland and they got 78,000 plus in the ballpark. He beats them 1-0. And Larry Doby drove in the winning run. He gave up 3 hits. He go a 1-0 3-hitter. Nobody got past second base. He's 42 years old, or possibly 52. And that's what I'm saying. You know, so people will say that this all myth and legend. No, it ain't. No,
It's
no,
there.
hey, you're not supposed to be 42 or 52 and doing what Satchel Paige did, what was supposed to be his rookie year in the major leagues. And of course, he didn't have the dominating fastball as he did in his prime, but he knew how to keep you off balance, and his control was still pinpoint. Yeah, no, man, he was special. He was special. And so, you know, it does make you wonder, though, what he would have been like in his prime. Yeah,
I,
because I can tell you now, he could get it to the plate in a hurry.
I remember I think I saw a video of him. He was like on a late night show, and
Yes,
he was
yes.
throwing a pitch, and the pitch just moved so many different directions. And I'm like, I've never seen anything like that
I
before.
told your dad, I said, you know, the Braves brought him back to Atlanta to help him get his pension. So this is 1968, I believe, and he was supposedly about 4 months shy of getting his major league pension, enough time to get his major league pension. And so Bill Bartholomew, who owned the Braves at that time, brought him back, and he's going to be a trainer slash pitching coach. But then Satchel gets to spring training, he wants to pitch, and so they let him in, and he pitched. I don't know, he pitched about 3 innings in spring training, gave up nothing. At that time, he was supposed to be 62 years old. You know, again, if you believe he's born in 1906, and he gave up nothing. And I remember the late great Henry Aaron saying that he threw him a pitch that he stepped out of the batter's box and it broke across home plate for a strike.
That's really crazy. I mean, Satchel Paige was really like he was that
Satchel, you
good.
know, like y'all say today, we talk about the GOAT. Satchel was indeed the GOAT. There's no question about it, because Satchel had everything that you needed to be great. You know, there were a lot of pitchers who maybe the stuff was as good as Satchel, but Satchel had the longevity, he had the great stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but he also had the charisma. You know, that's what I'm saying. You got 200,000 people filling up the ballpark to see this old man pitch.
Right.
They wanted to see, they were there to see Satchel. You know, they weren't there to see the other, they were there to see Satchel. And that's the way he was everywhere that he went. He ride into towns, and the towns were shut down because everybody wanted to see him. And he was the Muhammad Ali of baseball before we ever knew who Muhammad Ali was. He
Yes,
had
sir.
that bravado. He could sell it, but he could also back it up. And
Yes,
so
sir.
it ain't bragging if you can back it up.
Yes, sir. Okay, so this is one of my last questions. So everyone knows Satchel Paige, of course, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, rest his soul, and Don Newcombe. I wanted to ask you, who are some of the lesser known greats that played in the Negro Leagues that we should know today, and who are some of your favorite that we don't know today?
Oh man, it's so many. But I'll start with a couple that I like to remind people of. First off would be Oscar Charleston, the great Oscar Charleston. My friend Buck ONeil would say without hesitation that Oscar Charleston was the greatest baseball player he ever saw.
Mm,
Now, he thought Willie Mays was the greatest all around major leaguer. And most people would concur, because Willie Mays could beat you every way in which you could be beaten. He beat you with his bat, with his arm, with his legs, with his glove. And as you know, Willie Mays' career began in the Negro Leagues with the Birmingham Black Bears. But Oscar Charleston was an early era Negro leaguer who could do it all. The consummate five-tool guy, hit for power, hit for average, could field, could run, could throw. In 1921, he led the Negro Leagues in home runs, triples, doubles,
Wow.
stolen bases, and batting average in the same season.
Wow.
And if you were to ask the old timers in the Negro Leagues, they would say the closest thing to Oscar Charleston would have been Willie Mays. That is scary. And Buck
Crazy.
ONeil says he never saw a center fielder who could go back on a ball the way Charleston could. His instincts were uncanny. He just seemed to know where that ball was coming down right off the crack of the bat. And so he played a very shallow center field. So you couldn't bloop it in front of him. And unless you hit it on a rope, you couldn't get it over his head. And Buck says one of the strongest men he ever seen in his life. He says Oscar Charleston could take a baseball, put it between both palms, and turn the leather on the ball. Just
Wow.
freakishly strong. And then the other guy that I like to tell people about is a great ball player from Cuba by the name of Martin de Higo. They nicknamed him El Maestro, the master, because he could do it all.
Yeah.
Played all 9 positions, played all 9 of them well. He is the only baseball player in the history of our sport to be enshrined into 5 different countries' baseball halls of fame. He's
Wow.
in the Mexican, Cuban, Venezuelan, Dominican, and in the National Baseball Hall of Fame at Cooperstown.
Wow.
One year in the Mexican League, De Higo wins the pitching title. He goes 19-2 with an 0.90 ERA.
Wow.
The sucker hits 387 that same season and won the batting title too.
That's
don't make no
crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Well, Mr. Kendrick, it was great speaking with you today. It was an honor. Thank you for coming here to speak with me. And I'm pretty sure all the people who watch this will enjoy hearing about you and enjoy hearing about the museum and all these players. Keep up the good work, sir. Thank you so much.
Well, man, you keep swinging, keep doing this. You know, we need you out there playing that game, and hopefully
Yes, sir.
others will want to emulate what you're doing. But so proud of everything that you're doing as well.
Thank you.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.